Hey fearsome friends, I hope you're well and staying safe. Tonight I have some terrifying accounts from people who have been unfortunate enough to come face to face with either someone who was killed or has the potential to. One of the stories admittedly was just a complete misunderstanding, but scary all the same. So sit back, get cozy, comfy, warm, and remember, keep being creepy. Now before I begin to tell you what happened to me, I will tell you some background. You should know that I have spoken about it to very few people because it was so traumatizing. I just hope it doesn't happen to anyone else. It was during the month of May in 2019, during my third year at school, so I was 14 years old. My parents had separated a few months earlier, and I rarely went to my father's house because he was too far from my school. Now I'm very paranoid generally from watching threats and horror movies, and I always feel like I'm being watched from a movie that influenced me when I was young, even in places where I can't be seen, and I also never really feel safe, and even less so now. So on May the 2nd, 2019, I was sitting in class, and looking through the window I could see someone. It was a tall, old man. He wasn't moving, and he was looking at me. Now you have to know that my classroom is on the first floor, so when you're in there, you couldn't see the inside of the room, but yet he was staring at me really intensely. I turned my eyes away for a few seconds, and then I looked back, but he was no longer there. 3 days later, on the 5th of May, I was at my father's, and it was night time. I had just fallen asleep around 1 a.m. because I have insomnia, and a little later on in the night, I woke up feeling absolutely petrified and frozen, as if someone was watching me. Instinctively, and being very curious, I got up and went to the door of my room and opened it. The bathroom being opposite, I could see in the mirror that there was someone there, so I turned around very abruptly, and there was the man whom I'd seen in the courtyard, and he was smiling at me. He was blowing on the glass window, causing it to steam up, and he drew a man, whilst smiling and then leaving, as if nothing had happened. Just like the first time it happened, I didn't talk about it, because I'm a very secretive person, even if sincerely I was scared. I looked everywhere so much that I was paralyzed, and my paranoia was even more present. From that moment on, nothing happened for a long time, and I even started to forget about it. Then on May the 29th, I went to the city because I had an appointment, so I took a bus to go meet my mother at her workplace when it was over. Now this bus, when I take it, I always end up being alone after a while because I get off at the terminus. I have around 20 minutes of travel time, and today, I don't know why, I had a very bad feeling. The driver looked familiar. When the last person got off the bus, I told myself that I had to get out and that I was in danger. I could feel my heart racing. I looked everywhere and started to get agitated. That's when I realized that the driver was the man who had been watching me. He looked at me with a big smile, as if he knew that I'd recognized him. I pressed the stop button to get off as quickly as possible, but he kept going and even accelerated. I panicked. I walked to the very back of the bus to put as much distance as possible between us. I activated the SOS mode on my phone and used it very quickly. It's an app that allows me to send an SOS message to certain people by taking photos, audio, and video recordings. I used it and shared my location with my parents and called the police without taking my eyes off the driver. Outside, I wasn't in the city anymore. We were in the country, and I couldn't think at all. I was totally frozen. I was imagining all the horrible future scenarios, plus my phone had switched off because it had run out of battery. I was all alone. We had reached a busy road by now, so I went to the windows and knocked on them, trying to get the other driver's attention. A few tens of minutes later, the cops arrived, and I deduced that someone had called the police. Quickly whilst running, I approached the driver and pressed the button to open one of the doors and ran out towards the police. A few days later, after testimony and an investigation, I learned that the driver was a serial killer who raped and tortured his victims by sequestering them before beheading them. Since that day, I have been afraid when I take the bus, and I have to take it every morning and every evening. When I was around 11 years old, which was in 2014, my family and I had just moved from Tennessee to Texas as my dad was working out a deal for a new job. My brother and I were homeschooled at this time, which meant we could move in with my aunt and uncle with no problems relating to finding a house in a good school district. My family was pretty close back then, and all of the cousins got along with each other great. We loved to do everything together, especially me and my cousin Peyton. My immediate family, meaning me, Mum, Dad, brother and sister, had spent the past 7 years without a jack-in-the-box. It was terrible. We were all born in Texas, so we loved it. But living in Tennessee, we had to go without it. One particular night, however, all of our parents had gone out to dinner and told us very specifically to not leave the house. We were to lock the doors after they had left and just play games. Now you might be thinking this is now becoming about an intruder, but I promise you this is 10 times more bizarre. After all the parents had left, all of the cousins got together, and we decided that we wanted ice cream and candy. Not that it's important, but I remember Ben & Jerry's being the main target. So we devised a foolproof plan to sneak out and acquire the goods. Well, we thought it was foolproof. My older sister who drove, my cousin Peyton and I all loaded into my dad's car that was left at the house, and off we went to get the food. But we shouldn't have even left the property. On our way to the store to get the snacks, we decided that Jack-in-the-Box sounded much better than some sugar, so off we went. The drive was full of Bruno Mars and Meghan Trainor. How perfect does that sound for 2014? As we pulled up to the drive-thru, we decided that it was about 3 cars too long, and that we would just go inside and order instead. Wrong choice. When we stepped inside, there was one girl in the restaurant. She was short with a small figure and wearing winter clothes, so she looked completely ready for an outing. The girl asked the cashier for a water cup and proceeded to fill it with either Sprite or some other soda. I remember the guy at the register looking at her extremely confused, but it was late at night and he couldn't care less, I'm sure. When she finished filling up her cup, she drank it really quickly and started to turn around to throw the cup out and leave. I have an awful memory of her eyes being wide open, as if she'd seen something scarring. At this point, we had been standing at the entrance doors for the entire interaction, just watching for whatever reason. We were just very nosy, I guess. But as she was walking out, I looked down and noticed that she was gripping a large butcher's knife. Now this thing was huge. Immediately my heart dropped and I heard my cousin say, "Oh my God, no way," or something like that. So the knife-wielding girl left the restaurant and we go on to order our food, talking about it to the guy at the register and kind of laughing it off, but also still very curious and confused. As we left with our food, we saw the girl crossing the street to the CVS. Now it was kinda late, but there was still a good number of cars driving on this road at the time. She didn't look either way. She just crossed with ease as if invincible. We brushed it off and assumed she was just doing her own thing. But after a while of eating some tacos and talking about how fun it was to be out without permission, we saw maybe a dozen police lights start to enter the CVS parking lot. Like I said before, we were nosy, so we decided to do what any nosy person does: investigate. We drove over to the CVS and we were stopped in the parking lot by an officer to be asked a couple of questions. Now my memory gets a bit hazy here, but I remember it was a problem because my cousin and I were both minors at the time, so they couldn't ask us questions without our parents being involved. But they asked us a couple of things, and I remember my sister and cousin explaining that we had seen a girl wielding a knife in the Jack-in-the-Box across the street. So with that they let us go, and we hurried back home. A little bit later that night, when everyone, parents included, were winding down for bed, our mothers called the three of us into one of the rooms in the house to talk about something. I don't think any of us realized that they knew what we'd been up to. They sat us down and calmly asked us what we'd done that night. And I think we lied, but I don't quite remember. Either way, it was pointless, because they knew everything, including stuff we didn't know. Our mums told us that someone on Facebook had posted about 3 heroic girls that knew information about the girl in the situation that I'm about to explain to you. Heroic? Hardly. All we did was answer a few questions. Nosy is more like it. They told us that the girl had entered the CVS, grabbed a woman by the hair, and proceeded to hold the knife to her throat for several minutes before the police could show up. Apparently people had tried to get her off, but it was useless. After all, she had the weapon. The girl was also apparently screaming and just being very violent, but as it was so many years ago, I can't remember much detail. I know that that's not an end-of-the-world nail-biter story, but how bizarre is that? To this day I think about how easily it could have been one of us with a knife to the throat in a Fort Worth Jack-in-the-Box, or how easily someone could have been killed. But also, if it wasn't for the girl, we would have gotten through that night with our foolproof plan. We never got candy or ice cream that night, just PTSD. My cousin and I now laugh about this all the time, and refer to it as our Witness Protection Program moment. I had blocked this story from my memory until my girlfriend reminded me of it a couple of days ago. I started dating my girlfriend at the end of my senior year, and before we'd met, I had used multiple dating sites. In many of my dating app profiles, I had my Snapchat listed so that people could add me. This is important for later. Nothing led to anything with the dating apps. I'd talk to people for a bit, and eventually the conversation would die out. But when I began dating my girlfriend, I had deleted the apps but never deleted my account, meaning people could still see my profile and my Snapchat in it. Now I realized this after a few people would add me, but it didn't go anywhere because I'd tell them I had a girlfriend. So as you would imagine, the conversation would end there. But there was this one guy that added me, let's call him Adam, and he asked me if I was available. Being straight, I was used to guys adding me, so I gave him the usual response. Sorry, I'm straight and I have a girlfriend. I expected him to leave me alone, but he didn't. At first the messages were normal. How was your day? What did you do today? Simple stuff like that. Being the nice guy I am, I responded because I thought this guy just wanted to be friends, and having a gay friend is okay with me. But then the messages progressively got more creepy. He started asking questions about my girlfriend, and not the basic questions. Questions like, do you guys have sex a lot? Or does she think you're good in bed? I simply responded with, those are kind of personal questions and I don't feel like it's right for me to share my dating business with you. Adam would always apologize and not talk to me for a few days. Then he would hit me up again and ask creepy questions again. I eventually told my girlfriend about the situation, and for those of you who don't know, my girlfriend is super sweet, but she is also very aggressively protective over me. So she added this guy and basically told him that he needed to leave me alone. Unfortunately though, this enraged Adam, who responded with saying that I need to dump this bitch now. Naturally, I defended my girlfriend and blocked Adam. Everything was cool for a week until another account added me. The guy's name was Tyler, and he was super chilled. He was really nice to me and respected my relationship with my girlfriend. But as the days go by, I started to notice that Tyler's vocabulary was very similar to Adam's. I wasn't 100% sure about it, so I didn't make any assumptions that it was him. So I gave Tyler's snap to my girlfriend, who added him to investigate. As soon as she added Tyler's Snapchat, Tyler flipped out on her, which confirmed that it was Adam. As soon as this realization was made, I blocked him again. And from here, everything went quiet from Adam for about a month. I live in the suburbs of Chicago, and both my girlfriend and I live down the street from one another. So naturally, we see each other a lot, and both our families are really good friends. As well as that, our families would also house sit or pet sit for each other. So a month goes by until I get a letter with no address or name on it, just my name on the front. I opened it up, and to my shock and horror, it was basically a love letter from Adam. The premise of it was basically him saying that he loved me and he wanted me to run off with him. It also took a very sexual turn halfway through, with him describing what he wanted to do to me and what he wanted me to do to him. At this moment, two horrifying realizations hit me. One is that he knows my address, and two, he dropped that letter off himself, meaning that he is in my town. I immediately called my girlfriend, who is equally as shocked as I am, and after consulting with my parents, we called the cops. Unfortunately, since I had blocked as well as removed Adam's social media information, and that the letter had no return address, there was nothing we could do about it. Day after day, letters would keep appearing in my mailbox, until they also started appearing in my girlfriend's mailbox as well. Her letters were far worse than mine. Adam wrote of how much he hated her and how much he wanted to hurt her. He also stated many times of the ways he would inflict pain onto her until she broke up with me. And like me, she took this to the cops, and again, they could do nothing about it. Now, my girlfriend's family had plans to go to Hawaii for vacation, and I was to house sit for them. The first couple of days went fine, until around one of the last nights of the week. As per usual, I was over at their house, watching TV on the couch, when the power suddenly went out. It was around 1 a.m, and it was pitch black when those lights went out. The next few seconds were silent, when I heard a window smash from the office. To understand this more, let me give you the layout of the house. When you entered the front door, to your left was the living room, straight ahead was both the kitchen and stairs, and to the right was the office and dining room. On the upstairs level, as soon as you reached the top of the stairs, a bathroom was straight ahead, and my girlfriend's room was on the right, and the other bedrooms were on the left. Immediately I shot up, grabbed a kitchen knife and ran upstairs to hide while I called the cops. I quickly got into my girlfriend's room and slipped into the closet. As soon as I was able to contact the operator, I heard the pounding of the intruder running up the stairs. Thankfully, I had relayed all the information to the operator in time, who then stayed on the phone as we both remained quiet. The intruder took a left when he reached the top of the stairs, which gave more time for the cops to arrive and for me to get ready just in case I needed to defend myself. A few minutes went by until I heard the intruder start walking towards my girlfriend's room. In the only few precious seconds I had, I slipped out the closet and positioned myself next to the door. As soon as he opened the door and started to enter the room, I took the kitchen knife and drove it into his shoulder. A young man screamed in pain as I heard a heavy, metallic object make a large thud as it hit the ground. From there I bolted out of the house, where I was met by 4 squad cars and cops with their guns raised. I threw my hands up, shouting that he was upstairs in the right room. A few minutes went by and the intruder was dragged out, still screaming in pain. With the siren lights flooding the street, I got a glimpse of his face. It was Adam, and I was informed later by an officer that metallic thud that I heard was made by him dropping a handgun. Adam was from Texas and had traveled up to my state to be with me. He had rented a room at a local motel and would put letters in both my girlfriend's and my mailbox daily. He would do this early in the hours of the morning, which was confirmed by the security footage of the motel he was staying at. That night, Adam had plans to kill my girlfriend and her family, so I would choose to be with him. He managed to pry open the power box, switch off the power to her house along with neighbouring houses and broke in with the intent of her being there. Well, unfortunately for him, she was enjoying a tropical vacation. And to be honest, I have no idea how this outcome would have been different if they hadn't gone on vacation. I'm grateful that I still have my girlfriend as well as her family alive. So Adam, please stay the hell away from my girlfriend and me. When I was 12, I started babysitting for some family friends who had 3 daughters, ages 4 to 7. They lived in a cul-de-sac where nearly every home housed a young couple with children that were in elementary school. The neighbourhood was extremely close-knit, like the 1950s American block party communities. They had a communal policy on using one another's toys, which was that any kid could use a play structure in someone else's yard any time without asking. Shortly after I had started working in the neighbourhood, they revised the rule to, any time a family is not using a babysitter to watch their kids, to ensure I would not get overwhelmed supervising a swarm of kids I wasn't paid to watch. It was thus more or less known when parents were going out and leaving someone else in charge of their children. I was welcome to take the girls to play in any other yard that they wanted, and their parents even gave me permission to let them play in someone else's yard or sandbox independently if I needed a short break. Being an avid Babysitters Club reader, I didn't leave the girls outside unsupervised ever. I would wait until someone else wanted a water or bathroom break, and then corral everyone inside temporarily. Similarly, when the girls wanted to play in the treehouse owned by an older couple a few doors up the street, I climbed up, despite a slight fear of heights, and crouched in the little house with them, despite feelings of claustrophobia, to follow my own rule. Now, I don't recall whether my everyone inside, everyone outside together rule preceded the first odd interaction I had with the immediate next-door neighbour or not, but when the police questioned the girls I babysat years later, they said nothing bad ever happened when I watched them, because I had set up that weird, sometimes annoying rule. One day, while playing basketball with the girls in the driveway, the next-door neighbour came outside in a baseball cap and sunglasses and sat down on his second-story deck to read a paperback. I later noticed he'd turned his chair around 180 degrees to face us and the basketball hoop. I couldn't tell if he was looking at us, though he had no reaction to me staring at him, whilst flipping pages in the book like someone would when reading. This behaviour repeated every time we played basketball for the 5 years that I watched these girls. Eventually, once I noticed him in the chair, accessories on, I would suggest a game we could play inside or in the front yard, but out of view of this neighbour. The strange neighbour was familiar to me, as he went to my church, and I have never seen someone kneel in a pew, head bowed and hands folded, with the same level of intensity before or since. Once when my family was seated behind him, the priest came over to ask me to lead the children's mass during the homily, because the usual person was out sick. And this guy turned around and glared at me like I'd personally set out to interrupt his prayer time. When I worked in the church nursery during various masses, I would often make eye contact with him as he waited in line outside the nursery door to use the restroom. From what I gleaned from our family friends and other people in the neighbourhood, was that this odd basketball observer was a nice guy who gave up his apartment and job in the city to move in and care for his sick elderly mother. Since everyone thought he was great, and since he went to church, this was before the Catholic sex scandal broke, I figured I was in the wrong for finding him creepy. Even as young as 12, I was used to guys in their 40s and 50s asking me to go somewhere with them, or driving by slowly as I walked or biked or jogged to make lewd comments. I figured I was projecting those experiences onto this awkward, quiet guy who wasn't doing anything wrong. For instance, I was certain that if the guy next door was a creep, he would not miss the opportunity to watch with his sunglasses on and book in hand while the kids and I went swimming each summer when the family opened their above-ground pool. But he never set foot out on his deck when the kids and I donned swimsuits to play in the pool or backyard. I was more convinced that I was conceited and mean. Then, when I was 15 or 16, I caught him looking in the window as I cleaned up after movie night. The girls and I had put on a film after bath time, and instead of watching it theatre style in total darkness, we kept some lights on so I could braid the girls' hair. The big screen TV we used for movies was located in an addition on the house with floor-to-ceiling windows. Though my parents were OCD about shutting blinds and curtains when the sun went down to prevent people from seeing in, our family friends had no window treatments on the big modern windows. When I turned off the last light in the room, which was a floor lamp right next to a window facing the neighbour's house, I could see into the darkness outside, where the weird man sat on his deck in a chair in line with the window I was looking through. I looked over my shoulder and realised he had a line of sight where the girls and I sat on the floor during the movie. As I looked back towards the house, I glimpsed him hustling inside. I would have doubted I'd seen him at all had he not left the chair in an unusual spot. After watching him turn the chair around to read during many a basketball match, I knew where the chair sat that night, facing the window into the family room, and was not the chair's usual position on the deck. After that incident, I would suggest playing board games in another room, or insist on watching movies theatre style to ensure he could not peep in on what we did that night. Once the girls were asleep, I avoided the family room entirely because I was paranoid about being watched. If I wasn't in the kitchen doing homework or reading, away from all the windows, I'd walk around the original first floor footprint of the house, where all the windows had curtains. The first time the parents noticed my change in routine, they insisted I could watch TV or movies in the family room. I didn't mention anything to them, because I was worried my concerns were silly and conceited. When I was 17, my family heard an evening cable news story about a man in our town caught by a police sting operation in which a woman pretended to prostitute her 2-year-old. When they raided his house, the police found a ton of child pornography on his computer. Our family friends called a couple of weeks later as they wanted to know how I knew the young man next door to them was not safe. It turns out that he was the guy on the news. As they described it, the police found his blog where he'd written about his obsession with one of the girls who lived next door to him. It detailed his fantasies involving her and his plans to act on them. Things like lying in the treehouse for hours, hoping to corner her when she climbed up alone to play. Many of his entries focused on taking advantage of or kidnapping the girl while the babysitter was in charge. In his head, babysitters were like the ones in old movies, talking to friends on the phone or making out with a boy they'd invited over, instead of caring for the children. But as it became clear I did neither one of those things, his plans evolved to killing the babysitter, taking the girl and getting out of Dodge. After talking to the girls to ensure they had not been victimized in any way, the police said that I must have known something to have acted the way I did. All the pieces, the frequent run-ins at church when I had children in my care, or the weird things he did when he knew I was watching the kids next door, all fit together cohesively. I was relieved to know that it wasn't me being mean-spirited or imagining things. I was perhaps conceited, but the focus was not on me, but on the children. I wasn't crazy. So this was quite a few years ago, back in 2013. My closest and oldest friend and I happened to be in Istanbul, Turkey at the same time, as he owns a house that's perched on a hill and is very close to the snooty bars and cafes. One night we got really drunk. Bear in mind we were still 21 and 19 respectively, so we started acting a little childish, which encompassed talking to random people about random things, sneaking into the university nearby, and trashing the street and so on. It was really stupid stuff that I regret now and will never want to do again. Now his house was where one of the Bosphorus bridges was. Anyone who knows anything about Istanbul can imagine how beautiful and panoramic the view is. and just below his house stood a very famous cafe that was frequented by celebrities. On this particular night, for some reason, the cafe was closed. However, it was easy to get into, because they didn't have locked doors, but instead plastic coverings that you could just zip open. But to get to the plastic covering, you had to jump over a wall that was just under a meter in height, as the main entrance was blocked off. So for no reason at all, we decided to enter the cafe. I know, stupid and illegal. Well, I say for no reason, but our reasoning was, we wanted to see the view. However, that was dumb, because the vast space right next to the cafe contained benches and had exactly the same view. So we got into the cafe and walked towards the far end, where the Bosphorus is most visible. As we were enjoying the view, about 10 seconds later, we heard some noises. We turned, and there were two men standing behind us, one of around 25-26 years old, and an older man of around 60, asking us what the hell we were doing there. We told them the truth. "We're just here for the view," we both replied. We began walking back towards the wall that we'd jumped in from, and at this point, I was more embarrassed than scared. However, as we were walking back, I heard what sounded like a gun being cocked. I looked back to see the old man with a silver gun in his hand. I walked a little faster and jumped over the wall, and all of this happened within the space of around 10 seconds. As we walked and jumped over, the man was muttering some stuff that I couldn't remember because I felt shaken up by the fact that he had a gun. Once we'd jumped over, the guys were on the other side, still talking to us. He asked us why we were being so stupid and what our purpose of being here was, all the while waving the gun around. We just repeated that we wanted to see the Bosphorus, but he kept saying that he could kill us on the other side of the wall and bring us inside to make it look like we were shot inside private property and were intruding. Now, I don't know exactly what the law is regarding trespassing, but any cursory investigation into such a murder would show it was committed outside the premises. However, Turkish police are not always the most reliable in such cases. I'm pretty sure the guy was drunk, because he was slurring his words a little, and I saw a bottle of something on a table from where they'd come from. It's more than likely that he'd been part of some war, like the Cyprus invasion. He was probably telling his young friends some old war stories over some drinks. I've seen plenty of his types in Turkey, and he was certainly old enough to be in relatively major combat. So he was probably pumped up on all the memories, along with the alcohol, and ready to act out to himself and his friends some of his past adventures. Anyway, after him rambling on for about 2 minutes, we said goodbye and left. To be honest, we were shaken up for a while, and discussed how this person could have easily killed us, given if he was angry at something else at that moment. But when we got home, we laughed about it the next day. This absolutely terrified me at the time, but now I laugh thinking about it. About 5 or 6 years ago, all my neighbour friends would hang out together. About 11, maybe 12 of us all in all, on a good day. We spent every minute of every day together, and this particular day during one summer wasn't anything unusual. Now, we all live in a nice neighbourhood, but just as any other place, it doesn't really mean anything. We were at my friend's house that day, and it was as dark as it was going to get for the night, so at about 10 p.m. or so, we continued to shoot hoops in the moonlight, and I happened to look down the street. I saw a man in all black walking in the road, heading towards us. He wasn't even close to the curb, and he was wobbling all over the place in the middle of the road, from the side to the middle and back to the side. He was clearly drunk, and I pointed him out to everyone. I got that uneasy feeling in my stomach from reading and seeing every scary movie imaginable, so I continued to keep my eye on him because I couldn't push him out of my mind. As he was about 2 houses down, I went into the garage to stay as far away from the street as I could, and I could tell everyone seemed uneasy too, as he seemed to slow down as he approached us. I could hear his loud footsteps stop right out front, and I peered out from the garage. As I stuck my head back in, I heard him say, "I'm not afraid to shoot." The tone in his voice made my heart sink. He said it with such a serious and raspy voice, and he looked like more than trouble. Another friend yelled to us that the man had a gun, and we all ran into the house. We locked all the doors, and someone looked out through the window. He was still outside. What was he doing? Why won't he leave? We all started to panic. We had nowhere to run, and my heart was about to explode out of my chest. My friend had a small house with not many places to hide. He grabbed his shotgun and went outside, and I followed him back into the garage. He cocked it and yelled, "Do we have a problem?" The man seemed unbothered in his drunken state, and he took his hands out of his sweatshirt and said, "I'm not afraid to shoot," as he mimicked shooting the basketball with his hands. I nearly threw up. I was shaking from all the adrenaline that had gone through me, but it turned out that the man wanted nothing more than to shoot the basketball. I'm glad my group of friends all took it seriously regardless. So to the drunken guy who told the group of kids he wasn't afraid to shoot at night, I'd like to meet again. It'd be funny to explain the heart attacks you gave us. So this happened sometime in the 2000s, when I, now a 34-year-old female, lived at home. I lived in a corner 2-story house of an estate, which is an area of semi-detached houses, and had the back bedroom that looked out into our back garden. We had a side gate to the garden that was always locked, and we had a high wall around the garden itself, which could only really be accessed from the outside if a mate gave you a bump up, or to climb onto an electricity box that was about 1 foot away from the wall near the road. So one night I was woken up at about 3 a.m, and I could hear someone gently singing, speaking and laughing at and to someone. I assumed that it was my neighbours, and maybe they had a friend over for drinks or something. I thought nothing much of it and drifted back into a light sleep. But I continued to hear this singing and soft speaking, and I began to realise it's been around 45 minutes since this started, and I haven't heard a single response from another voice. I thought that maybe someone was out on the street, high and drunk or something, as there's a road to my right, neighbour attached to my left, and another estate to the back. Being a nosy teen, I got up to peek out and look, but I couldn't see anyone under the streetlight or in my neighbour's garden. But then I looked straight down into my own garden, and there's a man lying on the ground, perched up on one arm and swinging a butcher's knife around in his other hand, while my dogs, spaniels, roll around him and look delighted with life. What the hell? He's singing to either himself or my dogs. I ran into my parents' room and they got up to see what I'd woken them up for. My dad, who's generally a quiet man, ripped straight into action mode and grabbed his shotgun and torch and ran straight down the stairs. He opened the back sliding door, pointed the torch and unloaded gun at this guy, and yelled in a manly-ass voice that I've never heard him use before to "get out before I blow your head off." The guy jumped to his feet, but quite gracefully, and smiled and bowed before jumping onto our shed and hopping over the wall. We reported it, but never heard anything. Also, not sure why my dogs didn't bark at him. They usually bark at anyone they don't know. Hey there, it's me again, Miss Fearsome. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, then please hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to support me further, please check out my Patreon and sign up for as little as $1 a month. Also, check out my new YouTube membership levels with some exclusive perks. So until next time, stay happy, stay safe, and remember, keep being creepy.